let's dive right in today. And my goal for you guys is to, my number one goal for you is to walk away with actionable advice on how to perform and execute a better open house. And just some background on me. Can everybody see the screen? Maybe you guys could post up in the chat or just chime in with a thumbs up just to make sure we know it's working. Okay, good. Okay. If one can see it, all can see it. Cool. All right. So just a little background story. I've been in the real estate business for next year will be my 14th year. In 14 years, I don't keep total track, but I think it's somewhere around 2,500 unit sales in 14 years. If you do the math, that's averaging about 170 units a year. Just over $1 billion in overall volume. I started out in the team world on a team, and then unfortunately, my partner, team leader at that time, left the brokerage, so I was forced to open my own team. We've been running our own team for 5 years now, and since running our team, we've consistently averaged about 100 to 120 million in sales the last 3 years. So, to give you some reference, I definitely know what I'm talking about when it comes to how to generate leads or execute these models, right? I'm very experienced in like models to teach you how to do these things better. One of the core avenues for us to get buyers in general, and I still think to this day, it's the best place to get buyer introductions at low cost, is doing open houses, right? And so this year, it's probably going to be 25 to 30% of the sales that we do for our buyer pool. And last year it was probably 30, 40%. So it's always a big component of our business. And thankfully, we have a lot of listings. Like, we're a heavily listing-based team. So we have a fresh pick of open houses pretty consistently. But I've always been a huge proponent that if you're an agent and let's say you want to grow your business, or you're looking for ways to meet new customers without spending money on advertising, or you're trying to grow your business, open houses is the way to do it. And I can't think of, and I've spent millions of dollars over 14 years on advertising. I cannot think of any form of advertising or anything in general in real estate where the customer actually walks in to meet you face to face, right? On average, I do a lot of mass media, radio, direct mail. It costs around $6,000 per appointment to get an appointment through mass media, whether it's direct mail, radio, billboards. So you have to spend $6,000 to get one appointment for mass media. Whereas if you're doing an open house, you could literally get 5-10 appointments in one day for free, basically, of people walking into the open house. So that's a little backstory on who I am and why I'm passionate about open houses. And so today, in this 30, 45 minutes, hour, I'm going to share with you a model on how to execute open houses at a higher level. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of how to go and find open houses. I think we're all, we all know what to do there. Reach out to your office leadership, reach out to a top producer in the office. That's what I would do. And that's what I currently recommend to people is just, hey, call the number one listing agent in your office, send them your resume and say, hey, I'm going to hold an open house, like rip off and duplicate this model that I have for you. Screenshot it right from the PDF that I'll send to you, and give that to the top listing agent in your market and say, hey, I'm going to do all these things at your open house. Do you mind if I hold open houses for you? It's an easy way for you to show that you're going to have a consistent plan of action. So I would write this down. The purpose of an open house, first and foremost, now I'm speaking to you as agents, right? I'm not talking to you as my customer. The purpose of an open house is to generate leads. Okay. We need to get real and get right that the whole purpose of doing an open house is to meet customers who are going to buy and sell real estate. The purpose of the open house is not to sell the house that you're holding open or best present the house that you're holding open. Although those things are important, that's not why you're doing the open house. And the open house itself and the day of the open house is simply let's call it the event that you're going to do all of your prospecting around, right? And I think it's really important to understand that. And if anyone has ever come to any of my other classes, I think it's also important to understand, like doing client events and things like that, the event itself is not the important thing. It's everything we do around the event to generate leads and build relationships. We're just using the event as the hook or the invitation to make a great connection with people. So first and foremost, let's think of if we are going to schedule open houses, and we typically schedule those open houses on Saturday or Sunday, we want to create a schedule between Monday and Saturday. Let's say we're doing the open on Saturday. We want to create a specific schedule of events and things that we do purposefully all throughout the week to ensure that that Saturday open house is not a waste. And certainly we want to, if we're going to take 3 or 4 hours on Saturday out of your time, you want to maximize that 3 or 4 hours and make sure that your dollar per hour is high and you're holding the most effective open house. I can promise you, if you start executing every single open house in this way, you're going to generate 2 to 3 times more open house sales than you would have in the previous year. So Monday and Tuesday, if we're looking at our week and we're planning out these open houses, I'm a huge proponent of being strategic about what open houses that you're doing. Okay. It's obviously important to try to get a new open house, meaning you want to get a home that listed in the week that you're trying to hold the open. That doesn't mean that homes that have been on the market for a couple of weeks are not good open houses. It just means if you can select and you have the option, I'm always going to pick a new listing. It's extremely important to work on the excitement of a brand new listing. Now, if I have the choice between a brand new listing and a listing that's, say, in a mid-tier price point, like, let's say the brand new listing's $3 million. In Cupertino, right? Or I can pick a home that's on the lower price point end in Cupertino, say 1.5, 1.8 versus the $3.5 million open. I'm probably going to pick and strategize for mid-tier homes, right? These are people who are either first-time home buyers, move-up buyers into their like let's just call it the next category of home. I'm not gonna typically hold open houses in that upper echelon or upper tier of the market, not because I don't want buyers from that price point. It's just, again, if we're holding these open houses to maximize our time and get as many qualified opportunities as we can, that mid-tier or those good deal properties are typically going to net the result of bringing more potential buyers and sellers into that home. And so I would target brand new listings, brand new to market, neighborhood specific, like if there's low inventory in certain neighborhoods and those neighborhoods are really hot, if you can get an open house in those specific neighborhoods, definitely go after that. Most importantly, mid-price point homes. So not the low end, not the high end of your market. I would focus in the middle. And that strategy has worked really well for a decade of holding open houses. The key here, guys, is, you're not just winging scheduling an open house on Friday for Saturday, right? Like if you're going to go about your open house scheduling and planning, giving yourself a day or two to just wing open houses, I would recommend you just don't do them, right? They're just not going to work that well. You might as well not do it. But if you go all in and you have these things scheduled by Monday or Tuesday, so that you can do all of the activities I'm going to teach you today, I promise you, it's going to be a much more effective lead generation strategy, and you're going to have a more planned approach and be more prepared. Does anyone have questions before I move on to like the next topic of what to do in your planning?
Yes, I have one question.
Sure, Susan.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. So regarding the new to the market, so regarding my experience doing open houses, basically listing agent will do the open house themselves. How can I just compete that? Yeah.
So you're right. It's hard, right? There's no doubt. Like, first dibs will always go to the agent, the listing agent. But I would say I personally have not held an open house in probably 3 years, right? So, agents on my team have absolutely held our open houses and they get first pick. But I have agents in my office that have approached me the right way, meaning they actually presented me like what they're going to do at our open houses and the standard that they're going to set of, we're going to call 100 neighbors. We're going to knock on doors around the open house. We're going to clean up after the open house. I'll provide you feedback of the open house within an hour of me completing the open house. The recommendation I would have for you, Susan, is, like I had mentioned before I started this, I would create like your resume and here's my marketing strategy for your open house. And here's all the commitments I'm going to make for you, Mr. or Mrs. Listing Agent. And this is what I'm going to do to execute for you on behalf of your client, right? If you approach listing agents, like top producing agents in your market center or your market, I promise you that you're going to get an at-bat. Like, they're going to let you hold their open houses because they're not going to hold every listing every time. That's not the case, right? So even if you can't catch the first weekend, maybe they're going to do the first weekend and you get the second weekend. But I would say if you have a goal, send that resume and that plan to 10 agents that are heavy in listings. I would be willing to bet you're going to get a few open house opportunities by doing that. And then I would also say, if the market does slow down, like homes aren't selling in 5 days, there's going to be a lot more opportunity in the future to combine forces with those agents and get the first pick of open houses. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, you're right. Actually, I contact the listing agent. They just first down the market, and she promised me they will do the first week, and next week they gonna let me do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you could literally take a screenshot of this PDF and you can just make this your own and give it to agents and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do for your open house. And within 1 hour of me being done, I'm going to give you a full report that you can send to your seller as if that agent did it themselves, right? So you are providing a lot of value if you're going to do all those things for that listing agent, right? Nothing is worse, I can tell you, like being a listing agent, than allowing someone that's not a representative of you or your company, like as the listing agent, do an open house, but then something goes wrong, right? Like maybe that agent shows up late, like an hour late, or maybe that agent shows up and doesn't have their lockbox key, or that agent shows up and leaves the house a mess. Like, nothing is riskier for the listing agent than allowing someone else to do an open house for them. That's why I say it's not personal, I don't think, for these agents to say no. It's just more about how we show up and what we give to that listing agent as our reference to say, this is why you should allow me the opportunity to hold your open house. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. And I'll send this to you at the end of the class today. That way, you can take this and make it your own. Does anyone else have any questions about, picking those properties and what the best strategy is there? No, cool. Okay. If someone does, make sure that, you chime in. Okay. Second part of this plan. So again, first part is focus on the buckets of homes and just be strategic about, what homes we're holding open. midweek, so between Tuesday and Friday, this is where like the importance of marketing your open house and leveraging the event to generate relationships and also connect with people at a deeper level. Once your open house is scheduled, you should be absolutely marketing that open house. And you can do this however your personality fits whatever you are good at, if that makes sense. So the model that's been taught to me from Keller Williams, right, is we make 100 phone calls around that open house. So you're calling neighbors that live in the neighborhood, and you're calling them in a TCPA compliant way, and just cold calling the neighborhood to invite them to the open house. And the script for me is, hello, ring, ring. This is Steve Lamothe. I have a property that just came on the market. I'm not sure if you saw the sign, but we're having a big open house on Saturday. And we've had great success inviting the neighbors in the neighborhood, because usually the neighbors know somebody that they want to move into the neighborhood. So here's your opportunity to pick your perfect neighbor, and we just invite all the neighbors, right? So this is a great script to connect with people who live in the neighborhood for two reasons. Number one, it has nothing to do with like, do you want to buy or sell a home? Because most people are going to hang up on you if you say that. And then number two, oftentimes people will just start to ask questions, right? They'll say things like, well, I didn't even know there was a house on the market. What's it listed for? Because they're always wanting to know, what are homes going for in the neighborhood and how much is my home worth, right? It opens up a dialogue to find more sellers in the neighborhood, right? If they say, wow, I can't believe that home listed for $3 million. We're actually considering selling in 6 months and blah, 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 blah. It's a great way to generate leads that might do business in the future. And then it's also a great way to build relationships and invite them to the open, or get referrals for people who are looking to move into the neighborhood. If you're not into calling and you're afraid to call, that's okay. I would recommend that if you don't like to call, that you would print out your open house flyers, and like Wednesday, Thursday, you actually go to the neighborhood and you knock on 10 to 15 doors on each side of the property, meaning you're going to go to the left of the house and you're going to knock on 15 doors. And the script is same script as if you're calling. You're going to knock on the door and say, hey, my name is Steve Lamothe. I have a house right up the street. We just listed it. It's really exciting. But we've had great success, meeting the neighbors, because a lot of people have referrals for people who want to move into their neighborhood. You guys are the best advocates for the neighborhood. I just wanted to personally invite you to the open house. It's a great way to come and see the house, and also to tell your friends and family who you might want to move by. Can I interest you to come to the open house, right? If you knock on 10 doors to the left, 10 doors to the right, and 10 doors across the street, it usually takes about an hour to knock all those doors. And that's 30 homes that you've now visited, and you've dropped off your flyer for the open house. Usually, if you knock 30 doors, you're probably only going to get 7 or 8 of them to answer, right? So you're going to get 7 to 10 contacts by executing that strategy. Not only that, but you're dropping off your flyer and you're being proactive about how you're hosting that open house. This is even better if you have the listing and then you're communicating this to your seller and your client and letting them know, we're not just hosting an open house, right? We're making phone calls, we're knocking on doors, like we are proactively going out there to sell the home. So making a proactive outreach to do some lead generation around your open house is super duper important. The next step I would do is proactively market your open house to your database. These are people you already know. These are people that are in your CRM. I would create an email open house. Hold on one second, Sarah, and I'll get right to you. I would create an email in whatever system you use, Constant Contact, MailChimp, Command, and I would send out an email invite to your whole database. Very few people are actually going to come to your open house that are in your database, right? But this is a good way to sell yourself to your database to show them that, hey, I'm an active agent. I am still an employed real estate agent because a ton of agents are going out of business. And then you're also showing them that you're doing business, right? You're not out there just selling them constantly on social media and via email. You're actually just sharing what you're doing, right? And then it's a good way to like share with the listing agent if it's not your listing or your client, like, hey, I'm doing everything possible to get this home sold. Sarah, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question regarding when you said you door knocking. So I have a listing and I door knocking like the whole community, like 36 home.
Yeah.
My after the open house, my seller asking me like how many people come in, right? And I say, oh, this is how many buyer and how many neighbor come in, and say, oh, they just neighbor, they're not gonna buy. So they feeling like the door knocking is wasted, like not benefit them. And I tell them like, well, the neighbor, they have a home, they may looking for an investment or they have a friend to move in. Like, but do you have any other answer that I mean to answer for that question?
Sure. Yeah, no, sure. And that is, I would say with every client of mine, they're very resistant to the open houses in general. You know, either clients think that this is the only way buyers buy homes, like they want open houses every single weekend, or they don't think open houses work at all and they don't want the open house. So you kind of have to convince them to let you do opens. The answer I would give the answer that I would give your client is, and this is like anecdotal research, so don't quote me on this, but you can find statistics that it's like 20 to 30% of all buyers who buy homes came by way of a referral from someone that they know that lives in the neighborhood already. Does that make sense? Like a good portion of the buyers who buy homes have bought homes in the neighborhood specifically because they know somebody or they have a relationship with somebody that already lives in the neighborhood. So that's a good response to your client who's concerned, saying like, oh, well, the neighbors don't matter, right? They're not buyers. My response to your client would be, they absolutely matter, because the good majority, 20 to 30% of buyers actually come from relationships that they already know in the neighborhood. So our neighbors are actually probably the very best source of people that we could find to tell about your house. And we certainly want to get your neighbors in because they're going to be advocates. They already like the neighborhood, right? They live here. They love the neighborhood. So who better than to have come in the house or go knock on doors to talk to than the people who already love this neighborhood? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. To keep it simple, I would just say 20 to 30% of buyers come from referrals out of neighborhoods. So that's why we knock on doors. That's why we want neighbors to be, to be there.
Okay, thank you.
Hold on one second. I lost my notes. Anyone else have questions about that? Okay. So you're marketing your open house. This is the most important step of doing open houses outside of picking the right house, right? What are you doing with the event that you scheduled? So you're mailing it out to you're emailing it out to your database. You're making proactive outreach, knocking on doors, making calls. I would do it all. Like our model is we do all of these things. We email it out to our database. We call the neighborhood. We knock on doors. You should be making social media posts. If you really want to go all in, you should do like a video walkthrough of the house, inviting people to the neighborhood. Again, your buyer's not going to like raise their hand from these efforts. It's just, if you do this for every single open house and you do 45 open houses in a year, I can promise you, you're going to generate more leads because of this effort. And when you door knock the neighborhood, I would, like I said, on this sheet that I'll email to you, you can do what's called a neighborhood sneak peek, meaning you can open up the house for 30 minutes before the actual time. So let's say your open house is 1 to 3 or something like that. You might open the house up for a neighborhood invite only for 12:30 to 1. I know a lot of agents that do this with a lot of success, and it allows the neighbors to come in by themselves, and you know that they're actual neighbors. And then it also helps the seller too. Going back to Sarah's point, you can tell the seller, well, we don't want them to come for the whole open house, but we do a neighborhood sneak peek so they can then go tell all their friends and family who might want to move into the neighborhood. Got it? So we're marketing the open house proactively, super important. So the day of the open house, right? So if you've picked the right house, you've done all your marketing around the open house, the goal is you should be creating 1 or 2 opportunities before the open house actually even happens. But when you are getting ready to set up your open house, I recommend that you start working on it at least 1 hour before you are supposed to open up the doors, okay? You do not want to like get there 5 minutes before your open house and be scrambling the whole time. I recommend that you should set up 20 to 40 signs for your open house. I know that sounds like a lot. I have recommended that you just hire someone to help you put them out, or you ask your lender partner to see if they'll pay for someone to put them out, or you can have your children, if you have older children, go run around and put your signs out. You should put 20 to 40 signs. In Gary's book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, it recommends 40 signs. I would say between 20 and 40 is key. And placement of those signs is really important. I think it's super important to get that right and to stack those signs on big, heavily trafficked corners. The other key with that is going back earlier in the week. The reason you want to schedule your open house Monday or Tuesday and not like Thursday is you want to get all the consumer portals like Zillow, Realtor.com, and Redfin marketing that open house early enough so people can plan around it. I have anecdotal evidence that if you schedule open houses like Thursday or Friday, the traffic is like 50 to 75% less than if you schedule it on Monday or Tuesday. So you give the entire week to market that open house in all of the consumer portals. So if I said to you right now, I can increase your open house traffic by 50% with this one trick, you should listen to that one trick. And that one trick is making sure you're not scheduling any open houses after Tuesday. Okay. You want to be working on it the week before. So you're arriving an hour to 30 minutes early at the property, turning all the lights on. This is important. Everyone's kind of gone over this, but it's important to rehash, make sure everything is on. I don't do the whole bring food and treats and waters and stuff. If you want to do that, go for it, right? It's not something I've ever done. I do think it's very important to set up a station of, like, whether you bring your own table, nice table with a tablecloth and all of that, you have to set up some kind of table where customers are walking in. You want to be able to greet them with like a table and marketing material and a registration form close enough to the door as they walk in, so they don't like walk into the house and start looking around, and you don't want to have to try to get them back to your registration table, if that makes sense. Okay. So I think it's really important that you always have a table or something so you can set up right when they walk in. This might be controversial, and I've never sold real estate like on the ground in Cupertino, so this may or may not you know, people might argue this doesn't work in your market. I've seen it work in every market. So I'm going to teach you and tell you to do this, but you should get everyone's contact information that walks into your open house. Okay. There's no point in letting or doing open houses if you're not getting and forcing them to provide their name and contact information at your open. Can someone chime in and tell me if people object to writing down their contact info right away?
Yes, I have to.
Yeah.
Yes,
Susan,
I
thank
have
you.
experience too.
Yeah. So
And they
first,
false information.
Yes,
Who-
false information.
False too. Yeah. I would rather them give me false information than refuse and not give me information too. So, and just a little tip, usually with the false information, their name is accurate. It's just the email or phone number are not. So you can use their name to skip trace their contact information and actually get their correct email and phone number, just giving you that info. And the script for that is like, oh, hey, if they give you false information on purpose, I'll always go try to find the real information and call them. And if they do answer, I will say things like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I caught you. The phone number you gave me just didn't work. I'm so sorry. So I went on the internet and found your phone number. So I apologize if I'm overstepping, right? But I wanted to be proactive and aggressive and make sure that I reached out to see if you liked the house, right? A lot of people, instead of getting mad at you for that, they're actually going to commend you for your proactiveness and your aggressiveness. Like, that's what people want in an agent. It's not pushy. It's just going above and beyond and showing people that you mean business, right? You are a professional and you're here to make things happen. So one little trick I would give you with getting registrations, it's gotten a lot easier since COVID kind of trained everybody. If you go back to the COVID era, does anyone remember PEAD forms? PEAD forms?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man, wasn't that horrible?
I thought it was great.
I thought it was great because everyone was like openly giving their information, right?
Yes.
Like it was awesome. Like everyone had to give information to access. It was a horrible nightmare administratively, though, to send thousands of PEAD forms for all the showings, right? But I think that, remember, if you were an agent back in those days, the customer hasn't forgot that. And I think that the customer is still more prone to sign in. I just think that the energy that we give off as agents, if we're not confident about that ask, they're just going to resist that immediately, or they're going to give bad information. So how I approach it is, right when they walk in the door, obviously you don't just say, hey, sign in, right? You start to make small talk, you start asking them questions. And then I would say, hey, you know what? Respectfully, our client requested that we make sure that we're monitoring and tracking everybody who's been in the house. Obviously, there's health concerns, RSV and flu and stuff. We just want to know who's been in the house, and our clients like asking us to do that. Can you please make sure that you share your name and your information? That way we can give it to our client. Super easy, non-combative ask. 9 times out of 10, they go right to the paper, they fill it out, right? And now if someone continues to object, like, I'm not giving my information, I'm not giving you that. You have a choice. You can let them go through the house and try to ask them on the way out and build rapport again. In my experience, the people who are so hesitant to do that aren't real buyers or people I'd want to work with anyways. So sometimes I'll even ask them to leave. If hey, my standard is my client wants us to track everybody who's been in this house in case something happens, right? And you're unwilling to give that to me, I'm sorry, but you can't access the house. There's nothing illegal about that. Sarah raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question regarding, you say if they refuse to sign in and you have a right to tell them to leave the house. Like, I think is it too much, right? And it's not right. Because you there to help the listing agent to sell that house.
Well, I think you need to clear that with, I mean, if it's not your listing, you absolutely have to clear that with the listing agent, right? Say, hey, here's my standard that I set for my listings. Think about the liability we place on ourselves as agents if we allow random people into the house and something disappears, right? Something is stolen that costs $20,000, some kind of piece of jewelry.
If you think like that, then that's true. But like, I mean, it's not really common, and I feeling like we there to help the listing agent. Let's say if the listing agent know that, oh, there's a buyer who interested in a house, and you like not allow them because of that, then I don't know. I'm not really clear. I'm just questioning.
I think that, and no, it's a good question. I have struggled with that question over the years, right? Do we not force people to sign in, and by not being pushy, people will be more prone to like us, right? I have found that if you don't ask people for business, that would be like going on listing appointments, right? I'm going to challenge you on this a little bit, okay? If you go on listing appointments, but then you did not ask that client to sign the listing contract before you left, right? Your conversion, meaning like that client, very few clients are going to ask themselves to sign your paperwork, right? So, it's upon us as the professional to guide them to what they need to do, okay? And I have tried it both ways. I have tried to not push people to sign in and register, and I have forced people to sign in and register, okay? I can tell you that we had far more closings and far more relationships, and definitely we generated more leads for our sellers and the agents who have their listing if we require people to sign in at the open house, okay? Even though it feels a little harsh to require someone to sign in, if we go to the statistics, like they might be a potential buyer, right? So we don't want to put them off. But the statistics say the heavy vast majority is that they are not a buyer for this house, right? And so obviously, if you're holding it open for another agent, you need to confirm, can you require people to sign in? I would tell that agent, hey, I require people to sign in just as liability for me and your clients, right? It's a pretty simple thing. I don't want to not know every person's name that comes into my $2 million home. Fair enough?
Okay.
And Sarah, I would also, here's some good ammo, a good response for buyers when they object to you asking for their name and number. I would just simply ask them, hey, I totally understand. I'm not going to spam you with spam calls and spam emails, but let me ask you, if I was your listing agent and this was your house, would you want me to just let random people into your home that I have no idea who they are and how to get a hold of them? And then I also could not report to you how many people and who they were and what their story was?
That's a good one. Yep.
I don't know any person who would say, oh yeah, that makes sense. You just randomly let anyone into my home, right?
Okay, that makes sense.
And remember, if we help them see, like take themselves out of the equation and make it more personal, they tend to understand. Most people don't want to sign in because they think that you're going to hammer them with spam. Sometimes we do, I do, we do call those people, right? But we try to be respectful about what we send them, right? If we let them know the reason we require them to sign in is for liability's sake, we're in a litigious society. We just want to make sure, we know who's been in the house. They tend to totally understand. Okay. Couple things I want to share with you moving on from that. You really only get, especially in the open house format, you get about 2 or 3 minutes, guys, to make an impact on the buyer walking into the open house. Okay. You get that initial meeting when you meet them at the door, and then you get like a secondary meeting. Usually as they're walking through the house, you'll go back and ask them, see if they have any questions, right? That's usually, I try to make it about them. Do you have any questions about the property? And then start to get into, well, what has you looking for homes, right? Why are you guys stopping by open houses and whatnot, right? My anecdotal evidence is 50% of every open house lead that we've ever generated turned into a buyer within a year or two. So don't ever let anybody tell you that they're just looking at open houses, right? And that they're not interested in buying. There's only two people that come into open houses, okay? One, they're interested in buying a home someday, right? Or two, they're interested in selling their home and they're looking at other homes to see either what to buy or compare their home to those homes, okay? Oftentimes, I don't know about you, but I don't spend my Saturday and Sunday touring random open houses just because I saw the sign, right? Like most normal folks don't just walk into open houses. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so
Thank you.
if we approach our open houses knowing that, hey, my job is to get their contact information so I can help them in the future. And then number two is get out of my own way and know that half of all these people are probably going to buy a home in the next year or two. So it's really important to make an impact when I speak to them. And there's a couple ways you can prepare yourself to do that. First and foremost, always study all the comps in the neighborhood. You should know every property that sold, every property that went pending, every property that went active, and knowing other active properties in the area in a comparable price point will be your advantage, because you can offer to buyers at that property when you meet them, well, hey, if you want to see other homes, like this home does not work for you, but you'd like to see other homes that are in comparable price points, I know 123 Main Street and 243 Spring Street. These are great opportunities for you. That builds huge credibility with the buyer, and you ultimately look like the market professional. The number one reason buyers choose their agent is they felt comfortable with them and they trusted that they had experience and their best interests at heart. So if you can build trust, experience, and like solidify that within a 2 to 5 minute period, now you're building that ability to maintain that relationship in the future, okay? They're much more prone to answer your phone calls in the future and or give you their contact information if they didn't give it up front. Be clear with like what you offer clients. I think this is going to become even more important as a lot of these commission lawsuits continue to work out, like around the buyer agent fee and all of that. I think you need to make sure that you have your, buyer packet, your listing packet, some kind of flyer at the open house that you can leave with your client to show them like what makes you different than everyone else. I have classes on that, like how to create a compelling value proposition. If you ever, want to get more information on that, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Eric or your market center. They will share some stuff with you that we've put together in the past. Again, I'll reiterate, make sure that you get that contact info. Our initial response, everyone's initial response is they don't want to push people to get their contact info. That's why so many agents struggle to succeed. We are unwilling to push past our discomfort in being too aggressive, right? I promise you, if you take my word at that, you're gonna create better relationships, more closings. I promise you. And then you want to give them a reason to answer your calls. Okay, you want to make an impact. We have about 10 minutes left. Any questions on that? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. I am going to go into. We did a great open house, okay? We've generated our leads. people filled out contact information. Okay. Now what? I would argue that the now what after the open house is the most important thing you could possibly do, guys. You know, where people lose the most opportunity and money is there's two reasons. One, they don't do enough lead generation, so they don't have enough qualified leads. And number two, they don't do a good enough job like building relationships and converting the leads that we have. Okay. I have over 100 missed opportunities this year that bought or sold with someone else, right? We'll probably do 130, 140 closings this year. So almost as many closings as I'm going to have, I will have equally as many missed opportunities. So, you know, we don't have a lead problem. We have a relationship and following a plan problem. So I'm going to give you guys the steps to increase your conversion after you get leads from an open house. You're going to want to write this down. Hopefully this is being recorded and we can redistribute it. The very first text message you're going to send is, well, let me go back. Every lead should go into your CRM. Okay. Even better, on your table, you should have a entry form that when they put their name and their contact info, it automatically goes into your CRM. If you don't have that, then you should manually enter them before you leave the house and get in your car. So you can never lose a lead. Okay. This is one key piece of advice you have to get right. Put everybody into your CRM. Number two, send them a text message that same day, 2 hours after the open house is over. Okay. That script, and it's on this page, is, thank you so much for coming to my open house. This is Steve, Steve Lamothe we met earlier. On a scale of 1 to 10, can you tell me how you feel the property showed? I just would like to share some feedback with the seller. Simple, right? A lot of people will reach out to try to go build a relationship to work with people after the open house, right? And a lot of people are resistant to that. Now, if you ask them to rank something that has nothing to do with them, 9 out of 10 people respond to that text message. Okay. And they'll usually say like 7, it needed XYZ. It's very short. They're not like spilling the details to you. But the key is, guys, it has a 90% response rate, meaning they're answering your call, right? You're texting them within 2 hours and you're getting them to respond to you. That gives you an opportunity to pick up the conversation and start asking them more questions. Do not follow up to that text, okay? I found that in our team, like that text is automated through our CRM. We just weren't responding to the text. Like they would respond with 7 or just a number, and my agents wouldn't respond back. And we were not having great conversion, like we weren't building relationships. So I trained everybody like, hey, if they just respond with 7, you should ask a question. You never let a text or a call go missed. You should always respond and like be the last response. So if they just give you a number, you should ask, well, what would make it a 10 for you, right? Or you can ask, well, if it was a 10, would you buy it today? Because now you're gauging their motivation, right? If they said yes, you're talking to a legit motivated buyer, right? So within 2 to 3 hours, you want to send that text. If they respond, you should respond to them and continue the conversation to set up like what happens next. Like, would it be okay if I called you tomorrow to talk about your goals? Or are you open to meeting to discuss the purchasing process? Or has anyone ever offered to you to set up a meeting to discuss the purchasing process, right? After that text message goes out, you're going to want to call everyone who came to your open house the next day. If it's on Saturday, obviously you're not going to call them on Sunday. I would make sure that you have a follow-up made and it's scheduled in your calendar to call them on Monday. Okay. Monday morning, first thing. All you're doing is wanting to contact these buyers, connect with them. Some of them are going to say, I already have an agent, right? You're just trying to qualify the buyers again and see, are these opportunities or not? Anybody that's not opportunities, don't call them in the future, right? But until they tell you, I'm working with an agent or I'm never going to buy, they're all opportunities. You're going to want to call them at least 7 times over 2 weeks. Okay. And the most important call of all is the one the next day, or if it's on a Saturday open on Monday. The most important call is the first. Okay. Keep in mind that when people come to your open house, you're not the only open house they come to. Okay. They're going to several, and the person who wins that business is always the person who calls and builds the relationship the fastest. Okay. 7 calls and at least 10 text messages. And if you got their email, 8 to 10 emails over 2 weeks. Okay. I call it 21 days of pain. You're going to call, text, email to build a relationship with someone. I recommend the following model for categories of leads. I keep them as a new lead until I make contact. So any open house leads that you generated that you haven't actually spoken with yet after the open house, they're going to stay new until you speak to them. Okay. If you talk to someone and they say, yeah, we're kind of interested, we're just not ready to buy for 6 months to a year, right? You're going to change their status to, you can make your own, but I'd recommend anybody moving within 1 year is considered a nurture lead. Okay. Oops. I would mark them as a nurture. Anybody over a year, you would mark them as a watch. Okay. Anybody hot is within 90 days of wanting to move. All right. Anybody not interested at all, or it says, take me off your list or do not call, anything like that, you can mark them as inactive or put them in the trash, or, this is if you're running a real CRM the right way. Anyone have questions around this at all?
I have a question.
Sure.
So after the open house, I get everyone's contacts, and what I do is I usually leave a text so they know who I am, because people usually tell me people don't answer phone calls from a number they don't know.
Yeah.
So I usually add a text first, but when I do call, sometimes they just don't pick up, and I leave a voicemail, and after that I just don't know what to do. Should I just keep calling?
Yes.
Okay. Wouldn't they get annoyed and tell you to leave them alone?
Well, I love that you asked that question, right?
Yeah.
What if I guess my response to you is, what's the worst that can happen, right? They're either not going to answer or they're going to answer and be annoyed. In both cases, they're not interested. The
Okay.
crazy thing is if you don't continue to make those calls, 10, 20, 30% of them will answer and will be interested. You are guaranteeing you're never going to talk to those if you're not making more than one call. Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Yeah, you're right.
In sales, unfortunately, we picked a career where 80% of the time we're rejected. Most of the time, we're going to get rejected, and it's hard. But that's what makes the 20% of the time we are accepted so exciting and fun, right?
Yeah.
So I guess my rule of thumb for you is, in my organization, I want to make at least 12 call attempts, more, hopefully 20 call attempts over the course of 14 days until we decide a lead is not worth calling anymore, right? So Harvard Business did a study that on average, it takes between 6 and 12 call attempts to get a prospect on the phone who willingly gave you their information. So if it takes 6 to 12 attempts for someone who willingly gave you their information, imagine how many attempts it might take to get people who unwillingly gave you information, right? So at an open house, I would say you should call at least 6 to 12 times to try to get a hold of them. And I would just think about yourself, like think of your day, right? You're at work, or if you have children, or you're out to dinner with friends, you're trying to call people while they're living amid their daily life. And so oftentimes you're not important enough to answer right away, right? So it takes a few times to make things happen.
Yeah, and I feel like they don't have the desire to call you back because they just forget about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would recommend this. On the first call, I would not leave a voicemail. Okay. You don't want them to like know your phone number and know who you are and what you're trying to sell, right? I would just keep calling. Maybe if they haven't answered by the second or the third call, you leave a voicemail. I do recommend that you text, okay? If you call them and then they don't answer, again, I would make sure you text them and say who you are. That way your name pops up. You're right to text. It's important to text.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Anyone else have any questions around that? We're going to wrap up here in a second.
Steve,
Sure.
in regards to what you're saying, I think it was Ashton that was talking with you, and we all start from someplace in life, and
Yeah.
our confidence gets built up. And when I listen to your voice and what you're saying and how you're saying things, it's really obvious to me that your mindset is where it should be. You're expecting somebody to respond to you. And so, Ashton, I just wanted to say that sometimes when you said what you just said to Steve, they don't want to call me back, or I expect that and all that. I go into it with a mindset. I have to tell myself repeatedly, they are going to call me back. They want me. So much of it is mindset too. What Steve is actually modeling it for us, I feel. And so I just appreciate that, Steve.
And I will say, obviously, I mean, I've been doing this for 14 years, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes with time, but that's what, and Gary teaches us so much. That's what models are for, right? Models help us either increase our ability to succeed without the experience that we have to learn, right? We're taking something that someone else has learned and executed and perfected and taking it for our own, right? We're like 10xing our learning curve. And we're also systematizing it so that we personally don't get in the way when our emotion or our confidence gets in the way, right? So if I just follow this plan, I'm not overly confident. I too worry like, oh, are they going to accept me or reject me? Or do they want to work with me? Or are they going to object to my fee? Like I constantly am brainwashing myself, worried about like all these things. But if I just follow a proven plan and I just do the same thing every single time, I know that more often than not, we're going to succeed. And then I also know that if I execute it more often than not, I'm going to get better and better and better at it. And I promise you, once you start to see that it works sometimes, that if you call on the 6th time and someone answers finally, and they say, oh my gosh, Ashken, I'm so sorry. I missed all your calls. I meant to get back to you, but I got busy at work. Yeah, man, we're excited. We just got our pre-approval for 2.5 million. We're ready to go. And you've been so proactive with following up with me. You're my guy, right? When you get that answer, you're like, oh my God, like this is easy now, right? Like you have an epiphany. Like I have never lost business for following up too much. I've had people complain and blah, 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 but I've never had someone like fire me or lose business because they said, Steve, you followed up way too much, right? You're way too aggressive. But I've earned hundreds of clients because I was more aggressive than everyone else. And that's what people want in an agent, right? They want to know. Most people's assumption about agents is we're lazy. We get these big fat checks for not doing very much work, right? We're not proactive. We're not aggressive, right? So when you show up and you're like super consistent and you're aggressive, you're going to win far more business than you're going to lose. And I don't mean aggressive by nature. You don't have to be an aggressive person. You just have to want the business, you know, and you want that client to know that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Cool. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great week. If no one has any more questions, I'll make sure that you guys get this recording and the PDF, and we'll send that out to you guys.
Hi, Steve. May I have your contact information for question later?
Sure. Yeah, I'll throw
Like
it up
email?
in the chat, and then I will also make sure that that everyone has our contact information in the email that they send out. Okay. I'm going to put it in the
Thank
chat
you
right
so
now.
much. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
It's
you
really
guys.
helpful today. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Steve.
Reach out anytime.
Steve, a
question.
very
Can I
powerful
still ask a question?
class.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe I missed something. So how can we do that 2 minutes impression talk to the open house visitors?
How can you do what?
Do just a 2 minutes, you know, like elevator speech to attract their attention.
I don't have a specific script other than, you know, kind of like an opening dialogue. What's your name?
My name,
Yeah. What's your name?
Susan.
Susan. My name is Susan. So great to meet you. What brings you in today? Right? What brings you into this house today? Are you considering selling a home, or are you just looking to, you know, are you entering the market to buy a home? Which one are you?
I'm gonna looking for buy a home.
Boom. That's it. Great. What has you buying a home? Right? Do you have kids? Do you like to water ski? You know, whatever the things are that you start to do to get to know someone after that. But I'm pretty nonchalant and non-scripted, right? I'm just like, hey, Susan, what brings you in today? Right? My name's Steve. So nice to meet you. Right? I think the more genuine you are with those questions, the better off you're going to be. But it's important to do it because you have like a 2 or 3 minute window to make someone like you, right? They need to be able to trust you right when they walk in the door.
Right.
Okay.
Mm.
Did someone else have a question?
I do have a question follow up with that. So
Sure.
I'm hosting an open house and a client come in and then we talk. They like me. They start. They just new to the process and they interest in the house, but then the price point a little high. But then they like talking to me. They ask all kind of questions and how this and that, and I tell them. And finally, I find out that they have an agent, which is the referral from a friend. But then they also kind of new, like, and then they keep asking questions because they like to ask, like they like to talk to me. So, like, what should I do?
I mean, I've earned many a business, you know, many a clients, even though they had an agent at one point, right? I mean, I don't think it's crossing the line to engage a client who is engaging you who may or may not have an agent, right? If they're continuing to reach out to you, I'm going to answer their questions, right? So I don't think that's wrong. Now, if you're so busy that this actually can affect your outcomes of other things, then you should absolutely not waste your time. I certainly wouldn't go show them property if they already had an agent relationship.
No, this happened at open house, not at follow up.
Yeah. I don't think that that's enough time just at the open house to know whether or not they want to switch or anything, right? But it is,
right.
I have had many clients meet me at an open house and I make a great impact on them and we provide them value and information over coming months and stuff. And then they become frustrated with their agent and reach out to us later on. Absolutely. So that's why I say every opportunity is an opportunity. Even if they have an agent, you still want to make a great first impression. And then, you know, especially if they're like sellers and they see how you show up for an open house, they're like, dang, I want that person to be my agent based on how they're showing up for their open house, right? So I think it's, just show up with your A game most of the time, and people are gonna choose you,
Yep. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll make sure you guys get the recording and the PDF. Reach out anytime if you need anything. Okay, guys?
Steve, thank you so much for a great presentation.
Of
Really
course, of
you.
course. Have a great week. Have a
Thank
safe
you so
week.
much.
much.
Have a good Christmas.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Also, happy birthday, Steve, is coming up.
Oh, thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that. Thanks.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.